Hey, good people, in this video we're going to take a deep dive into the low end of one of my favorite bands, King Crimson. We're talking about legendary prog bassists like Greg Lake, John Wetton, and one of my favorites, studio ace Tony Levin. To me, King Crimson can be divided into four distinct versions of itself. Version 1 from 1969 to 1971, Version 2 from 1972 to 1974, Version 3 from 1981 to 1984, and Version 4 from 1994 to the present. King Crimson was officially formed in 1969 with band leader Robert Fripp on guitar, Greg Lake on bass and vocals, Ian McDonald on woodwinds and keyboards, and Michael Giles on drums. This lineup would produce the band's first album, In the Court of the Crimson King, and most consider that to be one of the most influential and groundbreaking progressive rock albums of that era. Pete Townshend of The Who called it an uncanny masterpiece. Greg Lake's contributions to Crimson's groundbreaking debut album cannot be understated. Not only as a co-writer, producer, and vocalist, but his amazing bass playing, which really grounded this wildly avant-garde mix of rock, jazz, and classical music. Lake and Fripp both grew up in Dorset, England, and shared the same guitar teacher, who was strict about learning music notation and would use complex violin pieces by Paganini as sight reading lessons. That sounds like another guitar virtuoso. Lake was already an accomplished guitarist and vocalist when Fripp asked him to join his new band, King Crimson. In the Court of the Crimson King would be the first time Lake ever played bass. He was known for playing a Fender jazz bass during this era, and later became known for playing Olympic basses. Some Greg Lake required listening includes In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, Brain Salad Surgery by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and his 1983 solo album Maneuvers with Gary Moore on guitar. Check out the description for links to all the albums I mentioned in this video. While touring in support of the first album, McDonald and Giles left the band, leaving the door open for personnel changes on the band's second album, In the Wake of Poseidon. Greg Lake was also leaving to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but agreed to stay to contribute vocals to most of the tracks. Fripp's high school friend and co-member of his first group, the League of Gentlemen, Gordon Haskell, contributed vocals to Cadence and Cascade, while Michael Giles returned to play drums, and his brother Peter took on the bass guitar for the departing Greg Lake. Mel Collins stepped in on woodwinds for Ian McDonald. In 1970, Fripp again rebuilt the group for their third studio album, Lizard. With drummer Andy McCulloch replacing Michael Giles, while Gordon Haskell returned as bassist and vocalist, as did Mel Collins on woodwinds. While touring for Lizard, the lineup changed once again, as Fripp and Mel Collins were joined by Boz Burrell on bass and vocals and Ian Wallace on drums. Like Greg Lake, Boz Burrell also started out as a guitar player and was known for his soulful vocals. He was even briefly considered to replace Roger Daltrey as lead singer of The Who. Also like Lake, he'd never played bass before joining King Crimson, but it was his bass playing ability that led him to be a founding member of the supergroup Bad Company, where he was known for his nimble, fretless bass lines. This King Crimson lineup with Boz on bass and vocals would record the fourth album, Islands. Fraught with more lineup changes, this would be the last studio album for King Crimson Version 1. In 1972, Fripp rebuilt Crimson with a lineup that would last for several seminal albums. This lineup consisted of drummer Bill Bruford, who had just left the group Yes after completing their first 5 albums. David Cross joined on violin and keyboards, and the amazing John Wetton took on bass and vocals. John Wetton was born in 1949 in Wellington, England. Wetton had a classical music upbringing and recalled how much he enjoyed learning Bach's bass lines, which influenced him as a boy to pick up the bass guitar and start playing in rock bands. Also an accomplished guitar player, Wetton's classical and jazz influences showed in his incredible songwriting skills. Wetton's bass and vocals propelled this version of King Crimson into a darker, heavier version of itself. His heavy-handed yet skillful technique on the Fender Precision bass, along with really loud high-watt amps and a Jack's fuzz wah pedal, created an unmistakable bass tone. Wetton would go on to play with Uriah Heep, Roxy Music, UK, and the prog supergroup Asia. Some John Wetton required listening includes Red by King Crimson, the self-titled debut album of Asia, and UK featuring the late fusion guitar god Alan Holdsworth. This lineup of Crimson would produce 3 key albums over the next 2 years: Lark's Tongues in Aspic, Starless and Bible Black, and Red, all receiving critical acclaim. Red saw the departure of Cross, leaving the band as a trio for this lineup's final and heaviest studio album. In September of 1974, Fripp announced that King Crimson had disbanded forever. After a few side and solo projects, Fripp started a new group in 1981, initially called Discipline, with former Crimson drummer Bill Bruford, along with Adrian Belew on guitar and vocals. Fripp had met Belew while recording with David Bowie. Renowned session ace Tony Levin was recruited for bass, and by the time the group's first studio album was ready for release, the band had convinced Fripp to drop the name Discipline and return to the name King Crimson. Tony Levin was born in Boston, Massachusetts in June of 1946. He began playing double bass at the age of 10 and studied music at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. Levin was a successful studio musician and composer by the time he joined Peter Gabriel's band in 1977. Fripp had met Tony while working on Gabriel's first album and hired him to play bass on his own solo effort, Exposure. In 1980, Levin notably played on John Lennon's last album, Double Fantasy. Tony is known for playing upright bass, Music Man Stingray basses, and the Chapman stick. He's also the inventor of the Funk Fingers, which he used with Peter Gabriel. Tony continues to be a sought-after session musician, lending his bass to thousands of recordings. Some required listening for Tony include Discipline by King Crimson, Prog Noir by Stickmen, and So by Peter Gabriel. This new lineup was creating contemporary sonic landscapes, with Levin introducing the world to the two-handed tapping technique of the Chapman stick, Bruford's hexagonal Simmons electronic drums, and both Belew and Fripp using early guitar synthesizers and lots of effects pedals. Fripp's continually evolving and complicated rack of effects and tape loops would become known as Frippertronics. King Crimson version 3 produced a trilogy of groundbreaking albums in the 1980s: Discipline, Beat, and 3 of a Perfect Pair. As with previous incarnations of Crimson, this lineup was disbanded in 1984, and Crimson would not be seen again for another 10 years. In researching this video, I started to see patterns of 3 in King Crimson, either in the number of years a certain version was together or in the number of albums a certain version created. I'm not sure if this was deliberate or divine, but I sure did find it peculiar. In 1994, Fripp, Belew, Levin, and Bruford were joined by a second bassist stick player, Trey Gunn, and a second drummer, Pat Mastelotto, from the 80s band Mr. Mister. This lineup, called the Double Trio, would go on to release the EP Vroom and Crimson's 11th studio album, Thrack. After a few years of touring, Levin and Bruford departed the group, leaving Fripp, Belew, Mastelotto, and Trey Gunn to record The Construction of Light, Happy with What You Have to Be Happy With, and the 13th and seemingly final Crimson album, The Power to Believe, released in 2003. In the years that followed, there was a revolving lineup that toured extensively, releasing live albums with no original material. Tony Levin would rejoin the group, replacing Trey Gunn. Gavin Harrison of Porcupine Tree would replace Bruford alongside Pat Mastelotto and session drummer Jeremy Stacy to create a new 3-piece drum section. Jacko Jaksic replaced Belew on guitar and vocals. And Mel Collins would rejoin the group on woodwinds and keyboards during this touring phase, along with ex-Ministry drummer Bill Raiflin on keyboards. Besides the studio albums and extensive live discography, there's also a wonderful documentary, In the Court of the Crimson King, King Crimson at 50. This film is a snapshot of the band on tour in its 50th year with intimate and sometimes emotional interviews. The film also chronicles the untimely death of keyboardist Bill Raiflin as he lost his battle with colon cancer in March of 2020. At the time of recording this video, King Crimson is not touring, but you can catch Robert Fripp and his wild actress-singer wife, Toya Wilcox, on tour. And I have my tickets, and I'm super excited to see Beat, a new touring band that will be performing songs from the 80s trilogy of Crimson albums. The members of Beat are Adrian Belew, Steve Vai, Tony Levin, and Tool drummer extraordinaire Danny Carey. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed all the time and research involved in making this video about one of my all-time favorite bands and the basis that propelled this group into rock history. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.